home last night. Hoffman rose to prominence in 1968 with a group of radicals who stood trial for disrupting the Democratic Convention in Chicago. In more recent years, Hoffman was an active environmentalist. Police say an autopsy will be conducted later this morning to determine the cause of death. Hoffman was 52. Authorities...
Evidence of suicide or of foul play. An autopsy is planned for today. Hoffman gained notoriety as one of the Chicago Seven, a group of anti-Vietnam War activists accused of disrupting the 1968 Democratic National Convention. He was 52 years old.
The man who founded the Yippie movement of the 1960s passed away last night at his Pennsylvania home. He was 52 years old. Known to an entire generation as an anti-war crusader, Hoffman became the protest leader of the 1960s. He stood trial as a member of the infamous Chicago Seven.
Death of Abby Hoffman, Chicago 7 defendant, founder of the Yippie movement, and 60s anti-war activist. Hoffman's body was found last night in the New Hope, Pennsylvania apartment he had rented in a 400-foot-long converted turkey shed. CNN's Richard Roth reports on Hoffman's turbulent life.
Abby Hoffman spent his final days at his home in picturesque Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The symbol of the 60s, a stormy protest and demonstration, died in his bed.
It almost appears as if he lay down to take a nap and just didn't wake up. He was quite peaceful and nothing was disturbed when we saw him.
Hoffman's common-law wife, Joanna Lawrenson, told the DA that Hoffman had canceled a trip he was planning and seemed depressed. Jack Hoffman, Abby's brother, said the family will always remember Hoffman's constant challenge to authority.
Abby Hoffman ridiculed the powerful and defended the powerless. He was a true American hero, patriot, and dissident. We live in a freer society today because of him. Abby Hoffman changed the world.
The change began in the 60s as Hoffman founded the Yippie movement and spread his brand of radical activism from Columbia University to the streets of Chicago during the 1968 Democratic Convention. He was one of the stars of a tumultuous Chicago 7 trial, where Hoffman and others were charged with conspiring to disrupt the convention. Chicago 7 defendant Jerry Rubin says Hoffman worked wonders for his causes.
And here's one guy, no money, no army, no violence, and changed the world. I mean, what a statement that is to all of us. One person changed this world. It's amazing. I mean, one person could do so much, you know.
Hoffman's attorney in the Chicago trial, William Kunstler, said Abby Hoffman used political satire to make people understand the issues.
He did things that made, I think, politics have meaning for millions and millions of young people by demystifying federal courts, by throwing dollars on the floor of the stock exchange, by convincing 30,000 people that he had actually raised the Pentagon 3 inches during that great levitation march during the Vietnam protest days.
In the 70s, Hoffman went underground, avoiding prosecution on cocaine charges. He had plastic surgery done and posed as Barry Freed, an environmental writer living near the St. Lawrence River. When he surrendered in 1980, a symbol had returned. Hoffman never gave up his fight for the environment and against government agencies. He was acquitted, along with Amy Carter, 2 years ago on charges of disrupting CIA recruitment on college campuses. But interviewed on his 50th birthday, Hoffman admitted sometimes the spark wasn't there.
There's different ways of looking at age. I definitely know I'm going through a transition. The fire is still there in the belly. The ideas are still there, but sometimes it comes a little late. You know, it's just a little late.
Hoffman came to Bucks County to protest a Delaware River pumping station. Activist friends recalled his personality.
Abby is a humorous person, and anyone that would miss the humor in Abby Hoffman would miss Abby Hoffman.
I feel as though he's going to live forever in the hearts of thousands of people, including myself. He's taught me a lot.
One of Hoffman's last appearances at a demonstration was in New York to denounce bookstores for refusing to sell the controversial satanic verses.
For all true citizens, I think it's their duty to stand up and support free expression and exchange of ideas. It's meant for all the people of the world, really.
Believe in the violation of every law in the books, including the law of gravity.
The style was absurdity, the substance revolutionary. When he co-founded the Youth International Party in 1968, Abby Hoffman wanted street theater to get Chicago's and the nation's attention at the Democratic National Convention. What he got was a riot. Hoffman and some other activists were charged with conspiracy to incite riot, and thus began a 5-month trial known as the Chicago 7 trial before federal judge Julius Hoffman, no relation.
And when they asked the judge, I forgot his name. Hoffman. Right. Judge Hoffman.
He and others were found guilty, but an appeals court overturned the convictions. Hoffman's political convictions remain firm, especially where Vietnam was concerned.
We have to make our own war of liberation right here in the belly of the pig.
In 1974, he went underground to avoid trial on cocaine charges. He did give an interview while hiding and talked of the 60s and the anti-war movement.
What we did in the 60s is unprecedented in Western history because the people rose up against its own military army and said, no, we don't want it, and the army gave up.
He underwent plastic surgery to change his face, lived 7 years on the St. Lawrence River in New York under an assumed name, then went public in 1980, turning himself in.
I'd rather be on the river than up the river.
For 8 years, Hoffman was on the lecture circuit, and the fire in the belly had not cooled. 3 years ago, he was part of a group including Amy Carter, arrested for trying to block CIA recruiters at the University of Massachusetts. That jury said not guilty.
This isn't the end, this is just the beginning.
Sometimes in college lecture halls, Hoffman seemed bewildered by the young of today.
It's a little embarrassing to be more radical, more activist than the next generation.
Hoffman's contemporaries have long abandoned beards and sandals for business, for politics, and property.
He was a true American hero who fought for the little guy, and the little guy's lost a real friend.
You be ready, damn ready.
Abbie Hoffman. Hoffman was found dead at his home last night in New Hope, Pennsylvania. He was 52. The cause of his death is still unknown. One of the original Flower children, Hoffman was a larger-than-life counterculture figure who made waves and headlines in the 60s with his anti-war, anti-establishment beliefs. As one of the Chicago 7, Hoffman stood trial on charges of conspiring to disrupt the Democratic National Convention in 1968. He was acquitted. Later, after being arrested on a drug charge, Hoffman went underground for 7 years. Most recently, he was a political activist for environmental issues and against CIA activities, and a lecturer. Known for his brash wit and media savvy, Hoffman remained a revolutionary to the end, although clearly he'd mellowed. Here are excerpts from interviews Hoffman gave at various times over the years.
I am an outlaw.
Then there's a distinct difference.
That's Anglo-Saxon, like Robin Hood. That's my choice. I want to be an outlaw. Dig it? I'd rather be an outlaw than an in-law. I'd rather be an outlaw than a fugitive. That's what it is. I am not a fugitive, but I got a word problem with that. I don't want the government to go around labeling. You know why? They confuse me with David Jansen. Everybody says David Jansen going to play in the movie. Ain't you interested who's going to play me?
I am a revolutionary, though, because I consider all the isms dead. Anarchism, socialism, communism, capitalism, ismism, libertarianism, anti-disestablishmentarianism, all the isms are dead, socialism, but what lives on are reactionaries and revolutionaries, those that want to maintain the status quo and those that want to change it drastically. And I'm in the second category, right? I'm a revolutionary in that sense. I was never really a hippie myself. I was twice the age of the average hippie, probably, but my hair was long, my clothes were freaky, and I was an organizer of hippies.
My concept of politics is different. The individual has two roles to play. One is their individual right to have a good, safe, secure, comfortable life, and the other is their responsibility as a citizen of the community and the world. So how you divide up your time, your energy, and your money between these two roles, that's politics, and you do that 24 hours a day. So it's a little difficult for me to get caught up with this, say, look, this is all there is to democracy. You just go once every 4 years and, press one from column A or one from column B. That isn't it. There's a lot more, it's something you do all your life. Curiosity, I think, is ultimately a driving force because I just don't find selling soap or cereal or all the other professions that my relatives have picked out for me for the last 28 years or so as challenging as fighting the powers that be. That it's just a more challenging role to play. It's how you find out how society is actually, how power in the society is actually arranged rather than how we say it's arranged. You find out the real secrets of life. This is it. You go to the edge and you poke your nose in. That's it.
Hoffman recently was cast as himself in the latest movie by Academy Award-winning filmmaker Oliver Stone. Titled Born on the 4th of July, Hoffman appears in a reenactment of the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. The movie will be released later this year.
Today on Abby Hoffman, leading prankster, Vietnam War protester with a talent for publicity of the 1960s, fugitive from drug-dealing charges in the 1970s, environmental activist of the 1980s. The one-time symbol of a youth culture that was told not to trust anyone over 30, Abby Hoffman died at 52. Correspondent Richard Roth reports on Abby Hoffman's trip from age of Aquarius to death at middle age.
Abby Hoffman didn't invent the 1960s, but he was always center stage, an anti-war activist and a clown prince of the counterculture, a self-proclaimed leftist, though he often seemed inspired more by Groucho Marx than by Karl.
They're going to have to cut off a lot more than our hair to stop the revolutionary fervor growing among young people. They're going to have to cut our heads off.
The whole world first started watching Hoffman in Chicago in 1968. Founder of the Youth International Party, the Yippies, a defendant in the Chicago 7 trial on charges of disrupting the Democratic National Convention. Abby Hoffman, 1968.
We have come to Chicago to fight!
Abby Hoffman, 1988.
It's not a popular job to stand on the corner and yell at the emperor has no clothes on, but this is how you measure democracy, by its dissidents, not by its conformance.
Hoffman was 52 when he died last night at his home in Pennsylvania. The cause of death unannounced pending autopsy results.
How's it feel to be a law-breaking creep?
By one count, he was arrested 42 times, trespassing, disorderly conduct, mostly charges stemming from protest demonstrations. Though in 1973, caught in a cocaine bust, he jumped bail and disguised himself with middle-class respectability until surrendering in 1980, saying times had changed.
This is the first time I'm in no hurry.
I was there, and that was...
He made his living as a writer and public speaker and made his mark on a generation. William Kunstler was his lawyer and friend.
This man had a genius for picking the right moment to say the right thing or do the right thing to bring out a political point.
Campuses today have become hotbeds of social rest. Campus life.
When people said he was stuck in the 60s, Hoffman said, that's right, stuck with a social conscience and a desire to get involved.
We were young. We were reckless. We were headstrong. We were impatient. We were excessive. But God damn it, we were right.
But it's sad to be nostalgic, he said just last week. Nostalgia, said Abby Hoffman, is a sign of middle age. Richard Roth, CBS News, New York.